for the tone of my voice. I'm just now recovering from a cold. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether I had the strength to create a video, but then I realized that the show must go on. As I'm reflecting on my journey in the hospitality industry, I remember the first time I truly understood that hospitality can have its limits. It was a stark reality that unfolded in the lobby of a five-star hotel where I was employed. I stood there observing a white guest engage with me as I were invincible. Meanwhile, my black coworker was being unjustly reprimanded by a manager for a mistake she did not commit. This moment, alongside countless others, unveiled a painful contradiction in the industry. While hospitality branded itself on offering warmth, welcome, and luxury service, this experience is often reserved for a select few. For many workers and travelers of color, the reality of hospitality becomes one that feels more like marginalization, containment, and systemic surveillance. I extend an invitation to you all to support this podcast by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with others who might resonate with our conversations about the pressing issues in the hospitality sector. Let's delve deeper into how racism manifests itself both overtly and subtly. Throughout the hospitality landscape, we will examine the labor practices, the nature of guest interactions, and the commodification of culture. Together, we will explore what a genuinely inclusive and a decolonized version of hospitality could look like. From an early stage in my career, I come to understand that visibility in the hospitality sector is a privilege not afforded to everyone. In the various restaurants and hotels I either worked at or visited, the hierarchy was glaringly evident even in the absence of a formal organizational chart. White employees or those who conform to whiteness were positioned promptly at the front, reception desks, concierge stands, host podiums. On the other hand, people of color were relegated to the shadow, concealed in kitchen, housekeeping, or dish pits. This separation was not simply a matter of operational logistics, it was display a racial ordering. Such segregation is no accident. The hospitality industry has long been intertwined with the colonial structures of labor, and that draws heavily upon histories of servitude and racial exploitation. Scholars such as Ruth Wilson Gilmore and David Theo Goldberg elucidate how racism serves as a mechanism for both spatial and economic organization within labor. In the world of hospitality, this manifests itself in who gets to be the face of a brand and who is relegated to perform invisible tasks behind the scenes. The divided between front of the house and back of the house staff reflect broader societal patterns. Front of the house employees often benefit from tips, promotions, and roles that are customer facing, roles that are treated as aspirational. However, the notion of professionalism in this context is often steeped in whiteness. Black hairstyles may be deemed as unprofessional. Accent are scrutinized, and darker skin is a subtly or bluntly pushed out to sight. I recall a hotel manager once saying to a friend of mine, "Your energy is amazing, but we are aiming for a clean aesthetic at the front desk." We both understood the implication behind the words. Behind the scenes, kitchens, laundry, and housekeeping departments are predominantly staffed by immigrants and people of color. Their work is physically demanding, often underpaid, and typically invisible to the guests being served. In upscale dining establishments, while male chefs may be celebrated as artisans, while the Latin or Asian line cooks laboring behind them remain nameless and unnoticed. As bell hooks poignantly describe, this dynamic represents an imperial gaze, reflecting a way of seeing that centralized whiteness while appropriating the labor and culture of others without acknowledgement. Furthermore, language barriers and the precariousness of documentation status can significantly influence who feels empowered to speak out. Many hospitality workers are undocumented or speak English as a second or third language, which allow employers to exploit this vulnerability, stifling complaints, disregarding requests for raises, or ignoring allegation of harassment. This racialized system of labor flourishes amidst silence, fear, and the normalization of exploitations. Perhaps the most insidious aspect is that this disparity unfolds under the guise of service with a smile. The hospitality industry demands emotional labor, especially from marginalized employees who are often required to endure mistreatment from both guests and management to maintain the appearance of welcome. Dignity becomes a commodity that must be traded for a paycheck and a potential tips. Until we dismantle this racial labor divides, the concept of hospitality will continue to remain elusive, especially for those of us inhabiting the margins of this industry, who often find ourselves on the wrong sides of the proverbial welcome desk. Guests, surveillance, and selective hospitality. In the realm of hospitality, there is a popular adage that the guest is always right. Yet, for many individuals of colors, particularly those who are black, brown, or indigenous, the unspoken caveat is that the guest is only right if they adhere to certain racial and class expectations. Traveling while black, brown, or indigenous often entails entering space where your mere presence is scrutinized, treated as an anomaly, or rendered unconditional. I have personally experienced being followed through hotel lobbies, asked to display my room key, while white guests are freely granted access. The witness staff at luxury resort tense up when BIPOC guests arrive in casual attire. This behavior transcends simple poor service. It is indicative of a racialized system of surveillance. Academics like Simone Browne in her Enlightenment book, Dark Matters, elucidate how surveillance practices are deeply entrenched in racial dynamics informed by histories of colonialisms and societal control. Within the hospitality framework, these practices are frequently justified under the banner of safety protocols. Yet, in reality, they function as filters that determine who belongs and who warrants scrutiny. I remember a former co-worker, a security officer revealing to me that their job was to keep an eye on anyone who doesn't look like they belong here. When I inquired into what that meant, he chuckled and replied, "You know what I meant. You know what that means." And I did. It was a coded signal, one that encapsulated the very heart of the issues. These dynamics extend beyond my own experience. Recent years have seen a surge of viral stories highlight the discrimination faced by black guests being unjustly treated at hotels, pools, denied services upon check-in, or forcibly removed from properties due to racial profiling. But most experiences remain unspoken. They live merely as a quiet traumas within the minds of those who endure them. Even in cases where BIPOC guests are not overtly mistreated, they are often approached with caution and skepticisms. White guests are typically granted grace, permitted to be demanding, messy, or even rude, without drawing a reprimand. In contrast, guests of color, especially black individuals, may find themselves compelled to overperform affability, dress meticulously, and carefully manage their tone, all to avoid being unjustly labeled as aggressive or difficult. A single misstep can shatter the fragile illusion of welcome. Though the hospitality markets itself as a sanctuary of rest and indulgence, the experience becomes a negotiation when your mere existence is viewed through the lens of suspicion. This selective hospitality strips away the promise of comfort, transforming it into a form of a conditional privilege that could be revoked at any moment if gratitude for merely being allowed and falters. Cultural commodification and the illusion of inclusion. There is something deeply disconcerting about witnessing one culture being commodified, reduced to a theme night, a curated playlist, or superficial menu items. The hospitality sector is highly skilled at marketing culture as a consumable experience, yet it frequently decontextualizes the richness, complexity, and communal essence that underlie those cultural identities. At one point in my career, I worked at a boutique hotel that prided itself on offering global dining experiences featuring rotating menus hailing from Morocco, Thailand, the Caribbean, and Mexico. However, the chefs leading these supposed cultural experiences were predominantly white. Most of the cooks who hailed from immigrant backgrounds operating in the background never consulted or involved in the creation of the dishes they prepared. They were merely directed to follow recipes crafted by others in this way. Cultures become a borrowed item rather than honored heritage. This phenomenon resonates with bell hook's concept of eating the other, which reflect the consumption of racial and cultural divergence as a mere spice of flavor, or while maintaining the dominant gaze and control over those cultures. It allows consumers to feel adventurous and worldly, but only in a predetermined sanitized pathway. The deeper narrative encompassing resistance, migration, and decolonization become occlude from view. Hotels and restaurants frequently exploit ethnic design as marketing strategies. Tribal prints, Asian-inspired decor, and authentic street food offering become merely aesthetic choices. Yet, this superficial inclusion rarely extends onto the actual individuals whose culture are being represented more often than not. Brands opt for aesthetic experiences over generally engagement, employing BIPOC chefs or collaborating with local artisans. Instead, they settle for surface level representations, a mural here, a spice blend there, a themed cocktail for good measure. This crude illusion of inclusion supplements authentic engagement with commodified experience. It is not about the redistribution power or giving the credit where it's due. It is primarily focused on the marketing of an experience for those of us whose identities and cultures are commodified and repackaged for sale. The experience can feel akin to watching our very essence become more a mere props in someone else's show. Visibility devoid to a voice equates to a different form of erasure altogether. Until the industry shift from cultural appropriation to real partnership, from simply using culture to genuinely investing in it, the hospitality sector ostensible celebration of diversity will remain disingenuous and self-driven. Despite the challenge, the seeds of resistance are alive and flourishing. This resistance can take many forms at times. It is quiet and understated. At other moments, it's bold and assertive. But the effort is always present in building momentum. I vividly recall my former coworker who decided to leave her job to launch her own catering company focused on Ghanaian home cooking. She told me earnestly, I am tired of asking for space. I'm creating my own. That is what reclaiming your narrative looks like. This movement is happening all over, from independent restaurants to online travel communities that highlight marginalized experiences. Movements such as Nomadness, Travel Noir, and Black Travel Alliances are redefining the meaning of exploration and travel. They do not merely document racism encounters. Instead, they are constructing new networks, sharing stories, and creating destination rooted in principle of safety, joy, and cultural pride. BIPOC chefs and writers are also challenging the prevailing narrative that shape culinary disclosure. Influential voices like Brian Terry, Tanya Wee, Alan Lemaire, and many more who refuse to dilute their food, their beliefs, or their stories. They are demanding space on their own terms, while also confronting difficult questions surrounding who gets to narrate culinary traditions and why. On the labor front, there is a growing wave of workers organizing, unionizing, and raising their voices, particularly in the wake of the COVID pandemic, which starkly illuminated the hospitality industry reliance on vulnerable, precarious labor. From hotel housekeepers to dishwasher, many of the most powerful calls to dignity and fairness are emerging from those whom the industry historically sought to silence. Resistance also manifests through everyday actions, refusing to wear a smile for abusive guests, calling out microaggressions from a management, sharing resources with undocumented colleagues, and claiming the right to rest even when the workplace does not afford it. A new paradigm of hospitality is not just a dream, it is possible. One that is founded not on performance, but on justice. A model that values the people who are instrumental in creating the magic rather than solely focusing on those who consume it. The hospitality industry is built upon promise of comfort, welcome, and care. Yet, for many of us, that welcome has always been conditional. Beneath the polished surface of service and curated experiences lies a complex system rooted in exclusion, racial hierarchy, and cultural exploitation. As both a worker and a guest, I have observed how racism influences every phase of hospitality, from who is granted visibility to whose presence is scrutinized and to whom cultural expressions become profitable. These are not isolated incidents. Instead, they form a pattern arising from an industry unwilling or unable to confront this colonial history, labor exploitation, and dependence, and witness as a norm. But change is coming through the acts of refusal, resistance, and reclamation. BIPOC workers, entrepreneurs, travelers, and storytellers are redefining what hospitality means. It is no longer simply about service. It is evolving into a space of justice, rest, and care, where dignity is not something to be bothered, but a fundamental right. If hospitality is genuinely live up to its name, it must first confront its own discomfort. This reckoning begins with listening to those it has historically endeavored to silence, allowing them to take the lead in shaping the future of the industry. Thank you for listening. I'll see you on the next podcast. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.